present our research conducted by Dr. Rifat נחmias and myself. And I hope that you enjoy our results. As a background, as we have already heard, it's already a known fact that in the American elections of 2016, there was a massive interference from foreign countries such as Russia. The main channels that were used during this influence on the American audience were actually using the social networks such as, but not limited to, Facebook and Twitter. It is also a well-established fact that, sorry, I have to go both. It is also a known fact that in Israel, a lot of people spend many hours on social networks such as Facebook, and I'm sure that while I'm talking here, some of you just used their Facebook account or Twitter just to check their feeds and things like that. Yes?
Quick question. If we spend
11
hours a day on social network,
what do we do at the
allegedly 7 hours?
You know what? It's standby. It's just on standby, and you check it from now every now and then you just no. You're sleeping at night. You're working, and you're checking every few hours what's going on your
social
feed.
media is tracking you.
That's 24.
That I didn't want to say.
That's 24/7. That's 9/11.
And as we can see, Israel ranks also the 7th in the world for internet users. So it is this part was the reason that social and political bots might have a crucial role in the Israeli political conversations, and therefore it is not surprising that before the first round of the elections, civil society organizations and NGOs were trying to figure out and find creative ways how to keep the integrity of the Israeli elections. And as you can see, I just wanted to say something about the third round that we are facing maybe in March, but hopefully not. But if we do, it will probably will be also relevant for the third round. This was the background actually for several initiatives that some of them we heard from Professor Nivel Kinkuran just now, and it was like in the 2 rounds of the elections, and one of the initiatives was actually a collaboration between the Center for Cyber Law and Policy via our legal clinic of Law, Technology and Cyber, which I'm the supervisor of this clinic, and it was together with the Israeli Internet Association and the Israel Democracy Institute. Our project was actually a mechanism for reporting fake or false accounts and political bots. And now we have to read a small disclaimer because we are lawyers, some of us here. The disclaimer is that we just published our reporting mechanism in Hebrew and on the website of the Israeli Internet Association. Therefore, it might have reached a certain audience and might be slightly biased against a certain wing of the Israeli political map. Slightly biased, slightly. But still, despite this, we still believe that our suggested model that we will hear after, how to identify false or fake accounts, is still valid even so. As for the methodology that we used, the website was online and operational for 2 months prior to the first round of the elections, and we received during this period like around 500 reports. Some was repeated reports, and with most of them were about Facebook accounts and not Twitter. And it's not surprising because Facebook has the main market share in Israel and is the largest between all the networks, the social networks, whereas Twitter has a small part of the society. How many of you are using Twitter here? This is not the right group to ask, but most of the population in Israel are not using Twitter yet. I heard some around 9% of the population in Israel are using Twitter as opposed to Facebook. As you can see, many more are using Facebook. So we were not surprised that we just got mainly about reporting about Facebook accounts. We were unable, though, to determine if it was a political bot that was activating this account, or was it a real person with a fake name, or a real person with a real name but with hidden propaganda or unmarked propaganda. We regarded, therefore, all the reports as false or fake accounts, and we did not regard them as bots. We went through all these 500 reports manually. I'm sorry, but we didn't use the computer here. We just manually checked them and checked each account according to a certain list of questions and measures that we thought were right to do, and I will explain them right now. The first one, we looked at dates. We had like inside information about a bunch of fake accounts from 2015 that one of the party in Israel just opened, so we checked if the Facebook account was opened in 2015, and we checked also how much time they were active before the elections, if at all. Another indicator was the photos. How many photos did the account have? Did he have various pictures, photos, or just one photo with a lot of other backgrounds? We saw a lot of other backgrounds in many of the fake users. We also checked if there was only one photo or many photos, because as we know, if we are just a real person or regular person, we're publishing many photos or not at all if we don't want our privacy to be infringed. So we just checked the photos on the accounts. We checked also the friends. How many friends do you have? And if you just joined groups without noticing which group you're joining, sometimes even contradicting groups, like I like to go to the beach and I don't like to go to the beach. And we looked at the content of the person, if he's just sharing content or if he has an original content, and so on and so on. Language, we checked if you had many spelling mistakes. I know that some of you just saw many friends with a lot of spelling mistakes, but this was one of the indicators, not the only one. We checked if you are talking in a gender that does not resemble your photo, and we checked if it was a machine translated content, like if you just took something from Hebrew and translated it via a Google Translate. We checked also many other indicators, but those were the main ones. Maybe I'll just finish my presentation and then I'll take some questions. We had actually two goals. The main goal was, of course, to keep the integrity of the elections and therefore to identify false or fake accounts and to keep, as I said, the integrity of the elections. The second goal was to try to form a model how to decide whether the user was a fake user or a real user. As you can see, after we checked all the 500 reports that we got. We checked the users in real time. The first time we checked it after the first, during the elections, the first round, then 1 month after the elections, and then 1 month before the second round of the elections. And we cleaned our data from duplications and also from accounts that we had like missing data and we couldn't check them. So actually we just finished with 259 reports that we checked manually, and we decided that according to our look and feel test, with all the indicators that I showed before, we decided that 45% of them were genuine, that means not fake accounts, and out of them 55% were suspected as fake accounts. We checked a month after the first round what's going on with those 259 accounts, if they're still active or just disappeared, and we found out that 70% were still active and 30% just disappeared, vanished. Nobody can find them anymore. So we checked the correlation between the relationship between the educated guess that we made and the actually their status after the first round of the election, and we found a very high correlation between between the first round and our educated guess, which showed us that we had maybe a good look and feel test. But then we wanted to see if we can form a model out of it, and then we tried to look at the 51 accounts that we had a detailed information about them. Unfortunately, we were not writing all our decisions in real time because 259 accounts were too much for us to just write every indicator, and therefore we just ended with 51 accounts with all the data. And we tried to look about like things like who had photos, suspicion photos, authentic photos, no photos at all. And then we tried to look also about politically active, and we saw another nice pie. And then we tried to figure out if the gender might tell us something about the model, and we couldn't succeed. We couldn't succeed in finding a good model, but as I told you before, our look and feel model that combines all the indicators was a success. It was 80% prediction in a good way. So actually the model works, but we can't say exactly which indicator was the best to indicate the result of the fake user. But during this activity, we started struggling with the question, are we doing the right thing? Usually civil society is not against anonymity, and it's not against anonymity speech, and actually they want to promote anonymous speech. And we thought about the process that we have for anonymity. It promotes freedom of speech. It is a tool to give you the way to protest, and it's an important thing for privacy and also for research. Some of us has fake accounts for research. So on the one hand, it's a good thing to have anonymity speech on Facebook. On the other hand, it can hide crimes, it can create hate speech, it can form some unwanted form of speech, and of course it can manipulate the election or any other thing that we can think of. During our period since the elections till now, we heard about a case in Australia. The person there was an employee in the Department of Immigration and Citizenship, and she was using a fake account just to criticize her working places, and it's a good thing. We want the blowing whistle to write things like that. And she was fired because she breached the code that she was bounded to, and hence she was fired, as I said, and the court found out that she was lawful to dismiss because she breached the code that she was obliged to. We had a certain story in Israel about Adam Gold. Adam Gold is a pen name of an Israeli surfer on Facebook. His identity was unknown. He was anonymous, and his publications about the alleged failures on the Israeli legal system have been widely circulated in the social networks and beyond. According to reports, also in Wikipedia you can find the reports, the account was removed several times from Facebook and was re-alived again until it was finally removed in July 2018. However, yes, you can't find them. You can't find Adam Gold anymore as a person. What you can find on Facebook is the page of Adam Gold, all about Adam Gold, but it's not a person anymore. It's just a page in Facebook and not the person itself. And that's our main problem with this project. On the one hand, we want to keep the integrity of the elections. On the other hand, we want to keep the anonymous speech also there in the field of in the open field. And this is our main challenge, I think, in our research, to decide whether we should keep on doing things like that and try to keep the integrity of the elections, or whether we should stop doing things like that and promote anonymous speech, or maybe we can do both and find the right balance between them. It will be one of our main challenge in our coming paper. So thank you very much. Yes?
One comment and a question. First of all, a comment about the unique features of the Israeli market. You started with
Yes.
you forgot one very important one. Israel has a sector of about 200 cyber corporations, which some of them are in the vanguard of such corporations in the world in subverting elections. That's their specialty, and it's an important export field for Israel. And Ed Snowden, for example, is well known for warning the Israeli public that eventually the same corporation and the same specialty is going to haunt Israel. So that's a specialty. But the question which was not clear from all your presentation was, do you believe that there was any significant impact in the election to what you called fake accounts?
Okay, so for the first comment, I can deal with speculations. If it's true, I'll deal with it. But
you don't. You think it's a speculation that
no,
Israel's specialty
speculation
is
that it will
subverting
hunt
elections?
Israel back.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure there are many speculations. I can't deal with all of them. And for the second comment, you're right. We didn't tell our educated guests, but for the first round, there was an impact. For the second round, we didn't see any more impact on Facebook. It doesn't mean that it wasn't going to the other platforms, because they knew that in Facebook they will be removed. On
How
other
did you
platforms,
measure impact? Did you measure how many friends they have? How many?
we try to see in a different project. We try to see the influence. How was the cluster built? How was the class was built? And we could see that there was a certain dialogue between inside the same party, and not many just influenced outside. But on Facebook we couldn't check it very much because of the API of the Facebook, and we didn't want to breach them. But we saw the impact on the first round. On the second round, we actually saw much less on Facebook. But I know that it just shifted to other social media.
And last question.
In English.
Okay.
Do you want to take more questions?
I don't-
So, can you say a little bit about the collaboration? How did you work with the social media, and what type of? So you identify fake accounts. With the next step, what was your experience in this channel?
Actually, we had accomplished a good connection with Facebook, and we just, after going through all the accounts, were just shifting all the results to them, just the results that we thought were fake or suspicious fake, and actually we had some kind of collaboration with Facebook, and they were willing to hear our guess about the fake accounts or not fake accounts, and actually they took like third of our guests down by themselves, and just afterwards we checked and more accounts were banished. But it's not a very good connection with Facebook, but they were willing to hear us, and they appreciated the work that we have done going through all those accounts, and they trust us.
So what happened with you when you did you experience any? So if they deleted third of the list that you actually provided them with,
Yeah.
but what happened with the rest? Did you follow up on them? With the third that was removed, is part of what you actually established that was fake also in the second round, or?
Yes, we checked also the fake accounts, and we saw that on the second round they didn't reopen those closed ones, but that's why I said they were shifting perhaps to another social media. They did not reopen those closed ones.
And how did you exactly define what is a fake account?
We decided that if it looks like a propaganda that is unmarked, it will be marked as fake account or fake user, or if the behavior of the person that is behind this account is not like a regular person, like posting every 2 minutes or sharing just ideas of others, we should just report him as fake account.
So you were looking for bots, or?
Actually, our first attempt was to identify those bots, but we couldn't succeed in identifying those if it was a bot or not a bot. So we decided to go to another definition of fake account, and it includes also bots, but we can't identify if it was a bot or not. Okay. Yes.
Last week at the Frankfurt Law Conference, Snigo was interviewing Justice Meltzer, and he said something which really surprised me. Maybe other people knew about it, which is that he had a direct line, the Central Election Commission had a direct line with Facebook and Twitter and Google, and that they were alerting the social media giants about the propaganda that should be taken down and the accounts which needed to be taken down, and that 70% of the accounts that he had identified were taken down. And I was sitting there, having worked on the sidelines of this project in our own little humble ways that weren't nearly as impressive as all of this, and I was thinking, wow, I wish I'd known that he was doing that, because it felt like we were replicating the work that he was doing, but with only 1% of the tools and resources at his disposal, and yet here we are doing all this effort, and he's got the power to send orders to Facebook to take it down at once. And so my question to you is, to what extent was this project complementing the work that Justice Meltzer and the Central Election Commission was doing? Or to what extent were we the prior and the activists that are playing games while the real authorities are doing real work versus Facebook, and they could like, and for the future, if there's going to be a third elections, are we
Hopefully
going
not.
to do some more collaboration with Justice Meltzer now that we know that this
It won't be
relationship?
just-
Maybe
First of all, it's not going
won't
to
be
take,
in-
it's not going to
That's
play
it.
that role again.
Yes, he said he's resigning from his
Future,
post.
it's like, we're not changing prime ministers, but we are changing all the other, all the other officers are changing. And so, but I can answer this. So I think that when he referred to 70% and what was the government, the election committee reported bots and fake accounts that were used by, that also include foreign attempts to intervene in the elections. So it wasn't just. So I think that this was complementary in many ways.
It was complimentary, and we had we actually approached Judge Meltzer, and we said that if we're not able to convince Facebook that it was a fake account, that we should approach him, and then he should approach again to Facebook. We didn't use this channel because it was a good channel without it. Yes.
How do you check if a user has original content?
If he has an original content, if he's writing for himself, not just sharing information from others, not just copying. We saw like a message in many users' accounts, so we decided it was just copy-paste message, and that was not original, so we were looking for an original content, not just sharing things. I know that some of the people on Facebook just share things, and they are not writing, but they are the minority, and that's why we decided we will take it into account with all the other indicators. Yes.
So first of all, Adam Gold is live and active on Twitter.
On Twitter
He
and
moved to Twitter,
and in
right?
other social networks, yes, but not in Facebook.
Not in Facebook anymore. Answering the earlier question about the impact. So it's very hard to measure impact. This is like PR people having issues measuring the impact. But you can see some catchphrases and ideas that were mentioned by these networks, mentioned over Twitter discussion, and the day after the taxi driver would repeat them. Now, the messages on Twitter and the messages on some other medias, like you would expect several newspapers, which are also propaganda, so I'm not going to mention exactly which of the newspapers or television channels or radio stations, had different messages. And suddenly when you hear from a taxi driver or for someone who doesn't follow Twitter necessarily these messages, you can estimate how useful this method is. So the idea is that you tell the people on Twitter the new message, then they repeat it in the parliament in the morning or at the other places, and it will diffuse through the regular real-life social connections that we have, because we all sit down in the morning or during lunch and speak with others, and we have this wonderful idea that I just heard from the real Adam Gold. By the way, I have news from real Adam Gold. So these ideas propagate and they exist in the normal life. It's just that estimating the impact is very hard. One thing that we know from some other sub-project that was related running in parallel, that there was a campaign for promoting non-voting in Arab communities. So something like that, which is on the borderline of legal, non-legal, certainly far from being ethical. There was such a campaign on Facebook for convincing Arab people not to vote. Now you can say, did it succeed or fail? We never know. Luckily we had the second round of elections, so we could do the difference. And either this campaign was really useful or not.
Oh, can you say something about, you actually developed some tools during the first round for identifying bots automatically? Can you say something about this?
I'm going to contact Iran, he did the work. But,
So Iran, maybe one of you?
You can come here, maybe.
No,
Those
it's
people will.
okay.
Yeah, so what do you want me to
All the secrets.
No, it's not a secret. We looked at more at the graph structure of these social networks, and especially on how people like others' content. And we have some properties that we can use and that are usable as indicators for fake or non-fake accounts. But we didn't really like it's an indicator. It can complement.
Now that computer science people are speaking, I would add that if I know the properties that you're looking for example, by listening to Professor's talk, I would actually create fake accounts which will defeat that.
Of course, it's a cat and mouse.
Yes,
usually.
yes.
Last question.
Yes. I wanted to ask about what was the legal foundation for removing Adam Gold from Facebook, and I want to tie it to what appeared like you were admiring the relationship between Meltzer and Facebook and Twitter, which to me is a great danger. So what was the basis for removing Adam Gold?
The removing of Adam Gold was according to the policy of the website. They're not.
What particular policies?
You're not allowed to be a fake user on Facebook.
But
That's
a
against
fake
the policy,
user, you
against the
never-
contract of Facebook. Against the contract of Facebook, Twitter, for example, allows you to be a fake account.
You mean anonymous?
Right.
Anonymous fake, not real account, and that's it. And for the second comment, yes.
And this is also true for hate speech. Facebook has some rules about in community guidelines about hate speech. They have a definition, and sometimes they suspend accounts because it could be legitimate speech under Israeli law, but it's not. But it's considered hate speech by the community guidelines of Facebook, like what we have seen in the chatbot of the Prime Minister, and therefore it was suspended without any intervention of the chairman of the election.
Yeah, but the case of Adam Gold is a unique case because you have in Facebook, I don't know, a large proportion of non-real names. The feeling was that the legal system was interested in removing Adam Gold because it was criticizing the legal system.
I don't have any indication to that, but if you do, I think that this is something.
Just published that they just erased like 5 billion accounts last year. Fake accounts.
Okay.
Anonymous.
We want to hear a little bit about the legal context, and not necessarily the Israeli one, but we want to hear what is happening in Germany. Germany is actually more advanced in the way it's in. It has created a regime for social media to operate, and so we want to hear a little bit from Paul Durer from the Weizenbaum Institute in Berlin about the constitutional aspects of fundamental rights related to anonymous speech online. There are more chairs here. יש פה מקומות.
Okay, so thanks for the introduction and also the insights on the Israeli election. It's also very interesting for me and for us at the Weizmann Institute because we're also dealing with that kind of questions. Currently, I'm working on my PhD thesis on social bots and their implications in constitutional law, and I want to share some of my thoughts on this subject with you. However, the thesis is still work in progress, so please bear in mind that these are only preliminary results. Before I go into detail, I want to give you a brief overview of the structure of my talk. To begin with, I will define the term social bot and explain how such bots can be used as a tool for political manipulation. In the next step, I will address the perspective of constitutional law. Here, I will focus on two questions. First, I want to discuss whether the use of social bots is protected under the freedom of expression. And secondly, I want to show with which constitutional interests such a use might be in conflict. And finally, I will try to outline how social bots can be regulated. I will take a brief look at the self-regulation regimes of the social media platforms. And above all, I would like to present to you a regulatory proposal for a bot disclosure law that is right now being discussed in Germany and that might be interesting to other legislations as well. So social bots are a phenomenon of digital communication which have been discussed for a couple of years now, and as I understand, I think you had also some debate here in Israel on that as well. However, the terminology is not consistently. So I want to start with a definition. In my work, I define a social bot as a computer program that communicates autonomously within a social network and pretends to be a human user. So we have two important features. The first is automation. The communicative actions of social bots are not carried out by human beings but are controlled by software. And the second feature is deception. Social bots do not identify themselves as an automated system. Instead, they act under fake accounts and simulate human behavior. This makes them very difficult to distinguish from human users. And it is exactly this combination of automation and deception that makes social bots a very attractive manipulation tool. By using bots, a person can significantly amplify his or her influence on social media. One person can theoretically act under thousands of fake identities at the same time, and thereby heavily manipulate public opinion. So social bots can be used for a variety of purposes. However, they appear primarily in the context of political communication, so it's quite fair to say, or to use the term of political bots as well, but that's probably a matter of personal preference. Prominent examples are the Brexit referendum and also the US election in 2016. Studies show that 20% of content posted on Twitter during that election campaign were not published by human users but by automated accounts, and I think that's quite an impressive number. In the meantime, there's hardly any election around the world where it is not at least claimed that social bots were playing a role. So how do social bots manipulate public opinion? I think we can distinguish between three strategies here. First, social bots can be used to create false majorities within social networks. For instance, an army of social bots can be used to maximize the like or follow numbers of politicians, for instance, or it can publish certain contents at a very high frequency, much higher than human users could do. The effect of such an amplification is that some individuals receive more attention than they actually deserve. False majorities distort political discourse and also directly change people's opinions. So I'm not a psychologist, but research shows that we humans are influenced by majorities. We like to go with the flow. We like to be in the winning team, and that means if we notice that certain contents find broad acceptance within our society, this has an effect on us. If a political campaign is massively boosted by social bots, we might jump on board and join the fake majority. The second manipulation strategy that can be observed is even more aggressive. Social bots can be used to disrupt other people's communication channels. For instance, during the Arab Spring, certain Twitter hashtags of the political opposition were repeatedly flooded with spam. And as you can imagine, if such a hashtag is full of irrelevant messages, it is useless as a communication channel. And finally, further progress in the field of natural language processing could lead to even more sophisticated forms of manipulation in the future. Advanced social bots could target individual users, start a discussion with them, and then try to convince them of a political agenda. Here we have also an overlap with micro-targeting. And I think these three examples illustrate that social bots are a fairly attractive tool for political campaigning. And with further technological progress, they will become even more relevant in the future. So what I'm interested in is how constitutional law reacts on this new instrument of political manipulation. In my work, I focus on German constitutional law. However, I think a good part of the results may also be valid for other legislations. So let's start with the question of whether the use of social bots is protected by the fundamental right of freedom of expression. Article 5 of the German Constitution says, "Every person shall have a right to freely express and disseminate his opinion in speech, writing, and pictures." In Germany, we interpret the freedom of expression in a very broad sense. Each person is not only allowed to say what he or she thinks, but there's also a very wide discretion in terms of how a person is allowed to express himself. This means one may choose the way or form of expression that appears to be most effective. And with regard to the phenomenon of social bots, there are two questions which are interesting. The first question is whether automated communication in general is constitutionally protected. And the second question is how the strong element of deception affects the constitutional protection. So let's start with the first question. How does the freedom of speech deal with automated speech, with automation in general? One could argue that only human beings can hold fundamental rights, so that computer-generated speech does not deserve constitutional protection. However, I think that such a conclusion is not very convincing. But why should we care about robot speech? Because in the end, no digital agent operates in a vacuum. We don't live in an age where strong AI is taking autonomous decisions. At least not yet. Every system is designed by a human being, and this means if, for instance, a social bot performs certain communicative actions, it is the programmer's instruction that becomes reality, it's not the bot's. So my argument goes like this. The coding of software is protected under the freedom of expression just like any other form of communication. Writing software code is not fundamentally different from writing a letter or a newspaper article. It can be used to express and spread human thoughts, and therefore deserves constitutional protection. This means if I design a social bot to express my opinion, this is a legitimate way of exercising my fundamental rights. So what about the question of deception? When social bots are used, the audience gets fooled in two ways. First of all, social bots operate under a fake profile. So the human being that controls the bot does not appear under his real name, but under a false identity. And secondly, it is not disclosed that the communication is fully automated. This means other users think that they are dealing with a human being, although they actually are interacting with an algorithm. This gives social bots the impression of authenticity and is the reason for their manipulative talent. So are social bots losing their constitutional protection because of this deception? I think the answer, at least for German constitutional law, is no. As I already said, in Germany we interpret the freedom of expression very, very broadly. For this reason, even deceptive and manipulative conduct enjoys protection under the freedom of expression. So we have to find a solution for the bot problem on another constitutional layer. The protection of fundamental rights is never absolute. it finds its limits where other constitutional protected positions are affected. So what interests are violated by the use of social bots? As you can imagine, we enter a very wide field of constitutional law. For instance, the fundamental rights of other persons might be violated, and the use of social bots can also have implication in electoral law and the law of political parties. However, today I would like to concentrate on the aspect what I consider to be the most important aspect, and that is the question of how social bots are in conflict with democratic principles. Article 20 of the German Constitution says, "The Federal Republic of Germany is a democratic and social federal state." So what does this tell us about the use of social bots? Unfortunately, not very much. Democracy is a very broad principle which needs further concretization. But one key element of every democratic system is a functioning public discourse. The public discourse offers space for democratic participation and reveals conflicts in society. And as a necessary condition for liberal democracy, the discourse itself finds constitutional protection, at least under German constitutional law. And one thing that is crucial for democratic deliberation is equality. The discourse has to be free of illegitimate manipulation. We need a fair competition, because only then can the best argument prevail on the marketplace of ideas. And that is precisely why social bots are so problematic. They are highly manipulative and they contradict fair competition. Those who use social bots can amplify their presence and they can shape public opinion almost at will. And that's why I'm convinced that the use of social bot is contrary to the ideal of a free democratic discourse. So as we have seen, the phenomenon of social bots leads to a constitutional conflict. On the one hand side, the use of social bots is generally protected under the freedom of expression.